Never Mind the Buzzwords is a community event from Jigsaw Better Business. Taking place bi-monthly, its aim is to build a community of businesses and professionals where you can learn, share and connect. It's about going beyond the jargon and coming away from each session with knowledge, tangible tools, tips, strategies, and hopefully an extended network. Each event is focused either on people or a process. In the process sessions, we talk about how we deliver value in our business. Topics here include lean tools and thinking, operational excellence, sustainability, and digital transformation. In the people sessions, we look beyond the process to the who, discussing topics like leadership, teams, culture, and professional development. Never Mind the Buzzwords isn't just an event that you attend, it's an event to participate in. So get involved in the conversation, put your camera on if you can, share your thoughts, ideas or questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. And don't forget to stay in touch. We have a LinkedIn group where we upload resources and recordings from this community. And if you follow Never Mind the Buzzwords on Eventbrite, you'll be notified whenever we post a new event.
Hiya folks, hope you're all keeping well. My name is Sophie. I'm just going to pop the link in just the LinkedIn group here, just so everyone has access to it there. I'm going to share my screen now, so just give me a shout and let me know that you can all see it okay. Now, can everyone see that all right, yeah? Super stuff. I'll take the silence as a yes. And anyway, well, hi everyone. You're all very welcome. So this is Never Mind the Buzzwords. So anyone that has attended before, you know the idea behind the group is to form a space where people can learn, share, connect. So you have discussions on a number of topics from leadership and company culture to lean management, digitization, and sustainability. So I'll be taking over as host today. So my name is Sophie and I'm sustainability lead here in Jigsaw Better Business. I'm joined today by Stuart, who I'm sure most of you know already. He's just lurking in the background. He might interrupt as he pleases if he has a comment or something to share. We're also joined by Eve McSweeney from Beach Hut PR. So I'll let her introduce herself in a little while. We'll be going through, I suppose, what communication looks like when we're talking about sustainability. We'll be addressing it from the internal perspective first, and then looking at how we kind of take that outwards as well. So as with all Buzzword sessions, feel free to comment if you have a question, anything you want to share, unmute yourself and ask, and use the chat, wherever possible. If you feel comfortable, leave your camera on. You don't have to. Just be aware that the session is recorded. So no, I suppose, incriminating information there. At the end, I suppose, of the webinar, we will leave time for questions if anyone has anything they'd like to say or ask. But we'll stop the recording at that time to kind of give you the opportunity to maybe speak a little more openly if you wish to. So we'll jump, I suppose, straight into it and kind of get down to the nitty gritty. So I'll be taking you for the first, I suppose, half of the webinar, and then Eve will take you for then the rest. So the topic of discussion today is, sustainable communication, and that's what we'll be discussing this morning. And I suppose how we can do it in a way that's, authentic and credible, but it's also engaging and that kind of captures people's attention. So I suppose in a nutshell, sustainable communication means, integrating sustainability into a communication strategy or framework by telling your stakeholders about your environmental impact, sustainability ethos, impact mitigations and reduction strategy. So I'll be taking you through what that looks like from an internal perspective, and how communication will or might be shaped in the future by legislative change. Eve is going to focus on how to navigate, I suppose, a good word for it is the sustainable communications, maybe through the media lens and perspective, and what that might look like for you, the business. So making sure that, that engagement stays up. So before we kind of jump into it, we might kind of have a little chat about, I suppose, the benefits of good sustainable communication, and so we kind of already have an idea of what that might look like if you're an outsider looking in, what the benefits are in terms of visibility and what that means to you as a consumer. But it does have, I suppose, benefits for the business itself, either intrinsic and extrinsic. So I suppose the first one we'll kind of address is, the boost in employee satisfaction. So I suppose in a perfect world, employees want to work in a place that has, a similar ethos or way of working that we do, that they support the same morals and social, I suppose, justice that we would also support. So employees generally want to be part of an organisation that is actively upholding sustainability initiatives and, I suppose, making serious strides in mitigating their environmental impact. So in 2020, there was a survey done by VentureBeat, and they found that generally roughly 1/3 of respondents said that they would only work for an employer that prioritised sustainability. 35% of those same respondents said it would improve their productivity rates, or they think it would improve their productivity rates. 30% of it believe that, if their business that they worked for, really made serious effort in improving their sustainability strides, it would place them as a leader within the industry. 40% believe it would improve the workplace culture as a whole. And it's going back to that, I suppose, working for a place that, upholds the same morals and ethos that you would. Generally, we would say, implementing any type of sustainability initiative can make, your organization more attractive to top talent. So where core values are continuously upheld, teams generally build stronger connections and then can become more productive and engaged, I suppose, over time. Look, the next one is, I think everyone knows that it builds a positive reputation, that has had its benefits and its drawbacks, which we'll touch on a little bit later. So generally what we would say is, when an organization invests time and resources in building a sustainable future, customers basically take notice. So I suppose more now than ever, customers are more aware of where their money is going, and they want to support companies that actively address, I suppose, their role in the climate crisis, and take responsibility for the impacts that they produce, basically. So McKinsey did a survey in 2020 and found that around 60%-ish of consumers said that they would pay more for products that they believed had sustainable packaging. So organizations that prioritize that sustainability by reducing and reporting off and offsetting emissions receive, I suppose, their customers' gratitude, respect, and trust, generally the more than those that don't. On average, around 70% of respondents from a survey by Nielsen IQ said that they would stop buying products, I suppose, from companies they believed were greenwashing or being inauthentic. Now, greenwashing is, I suppose, quite the topic at the moment, and we'll touch on it here by both myself and Eve. In terms of, I suppose, another benefit for the business, it differentiates you from your competition, really. So although ultimately sustainability should, become common practice, in all layers of society, it can today still create, I suppose, a competitive advantage that helps business performance. So while sustainable action, and I suppose by default sustainable communication, shouldn't be seen, I suppose, as strictly as a strategic tool, it is undoubtedly positive for businesses to, I suppose, invest time and resources into it. And then finally, the last one kind of encompasses everything, is that, your stakeholders pay attention. There's a growing interest in, what the environmental, social, and I suppose governance performance of companies are, and where I suppose customers are investing that money into. So the thing we want to get across, and I suppose it's going to, you'll hear it a lot today during the session, is the idea of, trust and transparency. So the greatest benefit you'll see from, a really good sustainable communication strategy is, the sense of trust that consumers will give you as a result, of being transparent. So there was a quote that we kind of came across a few years ago. So I think it was actually the first year during COVID. And it was, trust is a powerful commodity and transparency fosters trust. So when Tech Target released this article basically saying, we're at a time where there's a lot of environmental, social, political issues, and, customers are expecting their brands to, be frank and honest about, where they stand on the issues and what they're doing to, assist, mitigate. So it's important to have, basically. And the first step in pursuing transparency with the customers is to achieve it within the business itself. And we can kind of see, once we kind of introduce that commitment at every level, we can kind of have those honest discussions in-house about what the business is doing, what the business's goals are, what the business for the future looks like. We can start to build that outwards then. before, I suppose, any communication strategy starts, the single most important thing that you have to do is to put in the work in the first place. So while the emphasis today is on very much, how we can communicate sustainability, the foundation is the work you put into it in the first place. So in order to kind of have that authentic and, transparent, communication strategy, you really need to understand what your impacts are, and manage what you're doing to reduce them. Have that outlined action plan in place to reduce your impacts. What are your long-term sustainability goals? It's really making sure that you have that, I suppose, that foundation laid before any type of communication builds off of it. So in terms of building it internally first, there's, I suppose, if you Google, how to communicate sustainability internally, you'll get a load of, I suppose, frameworks and tidbits and I suppose tips that you can use. I suppose the important thing here is to keep it as, I suppose, as clear and concise as possible. And we'll discuss, I suppose, what we think are the 4 main things to address when we do kind of chat about, what it looks like to communicate internally. I suppose the thing to bear in mind that any type of external communication is really built off of the internal one that you have in place first. So once that robust framework is in place, the emphasis is, on making sure that the word is out there, basically. So transparency, as I said, the word of the day. Most businesses are far from perfect, and for the most part, the people who you work with, the people that work for you, don't expect you to be. Employees generally do, however, appreciate when companies, make active steps in addressing their pitfalls, and actively acknowledge where they are falling short. So when addressing environmental concerns, it's important, emphasize how your company, how you plan to continuously improve, how you set clear goals, what are those reachable targets, how, tell people about how you plan to achieve them, and how, most importantly, you plan to measure them. We would generally say why optimism is great, and with sustainability, we should try to reach for the stars. When it comes to organising that business action plan, it is important that, it is as realistic as possible, that, we have realistic goals with, accurate timeframes attached to them, and that is the priority for being transparent. In terms of sharing your motivations, you'll see if you've ever been to a talk on, sustainable communications, they call it, how to share your sustainability story. And the reason they kind of phrase it like this, the reason we phrase it like this, is because it's an easy concept to understand sustainability as a journey. And this is the best place to start at the beginning. So tell people, I suppose, where and when you started. So what is your motivation for change? And it can generally come anywhere, and you should identify, I suppose, what influenced you or who influenced you. Maybe reflect on why you're, starting your sustainability journey. Perhaps you find that, the waste you're producing is, unmanageable and it is super costly. Or maybe, you find that scarcity is actually really affecting your ability to source your raw materials. Or, maybe you're just felt inspired by the work that others were doing. Or even, there's legislation coming in the pipeline. Maybe you just want to be ahead of the curve and make sure that you're doing everything, I suppose, before everything kind of comes into place. It's important that wherever you started, though, make sure that you share your passion and purpose with those that you work with. Tell them what you believe sustainability means to you, what it means to the business, and how do you plan to kind of achieve it within the company. So the avoid jargon and the buzzwords, and this can be really, really tricky to navigate. So I'm sure, as so many of you know, even just from general discourse with peers, stuff written in the news, the conversation surrounding sustainability and environmentalism is really, it's chocked full of terms like, eco and environmentally friendly and green. I suppose be careful of your maybe over-reliance on terms like these when you describe what your business is doing. They actually don't do anything to quantify the work that you're doing. Instead, look, you may find it beneficial to simply state your efforts in a way that defines the issue as is, and really look to kind of humanize the work that you as the business are looking to do. As with anything related to sustainability, and I'm sure Eve will chat to you about this a little bit, the language you use is really important, and this starts from within the company. So making sure you use that clear, concise language, avoid using confusing terminology. There is, I suppose, it can be funny when, coming from a science background myself, but to kind of feel the need to almost convolute the language, really scientific terms, to kind of make what you're doing sound justifiable or authentic. But really, the sign that you're doing something right and that the good framework is in place is if you can explain it in layman's terms layman's terms. So make sure you're doing that. The last one is to quantify your efforts. So, we should be making every effort possible to provide employees with, tangible, factual information about, what the business is doing in mitigating their impacts. Generally associating facts and figures to our efforts allow, the people that we work with to kind of clearly see, what we are doing, how are we doing it, what the effect is on the natural world. But I suppose before we even get to the nitty-gritty of quantifying it, it becomes important, what are we actually looking for? You can quantify a number of things in your business. I suppose the focal points that you might find are the easiest to focus on, and maybe are stuff like energy consumption, waste generation, water management, carbon emissions. Once you've measured what those are, you can kind of start to understand the significance of your efforts. The information that you decide to share with the employees, and then I suppose with the customers after that, will depend on how you are measuring your impacts. There is a tendency, I suppose, to once you begin to quantify things, to highlight the really good things and what you're doing really well, and to maybe ignore or maybe not acknowledge the stuff that maybe doesn't make us look as good. It's important to nearly have full disclosure here, and it comes back to this idea of being transparent. Even if there's something that maybe you're not doing so well at the moment in, it is important to build an action plan from that and make sure that those you work with know about it. So within the business, what should it actually look like? So generally, when it's done correctly, efficient internal communication should come in two forms, really. So it should be, first one should be, a one-way channel of communication through published reports and sustainability policies. We'll chat about what this might look like from a legislation perspective in a little bit, but this is where you'll find your facts and figures, your action plans on paper, laid out clearly for those that you work with to see. The other way is just as important, but it should be that active, engaging discussion on particular subjects surrounding sustainability. Generally, we would kind of all agree that environmentalism and sustainability is a super complex issue, and it's really important to have those open and frank discussions on it, and maybe shine a light on some of the more complex, I suppose, intricacies of it. So in any sustainability plan or strategy, internal communication plays a vital role. In order to plan, I suppose, and develop sustainability, it's a fundamental that we allow, I suppose, people to speak openly and honestly and to express themselves. And if they find there's an issue, that they have the floor to address those with those that they work with. So I'd kind of mentioned that we would touch on the legislation side of things and where we're kind of looking in terms of national and international standards. So there's CSRD. I'm not sure what, I suppose, everyone's current knowledge of it is, but it is, it's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So I'm sure some of you might have heard of it already. It'll require companies to report on, how sustainability issues such as climate change impact their business, and also how their business in turn affects people and the planet. The goal of CSRD is really to help investors, civil society organisations, customers, any other stakeholders in general, to evaluate the sustainability performance of a company, and then to make a decision for themselves based on that information to decide, look, is this a business that I want to invest my time and money in? So when it comes time for certain businesses to, I suppose, disclose and report on this, we will, I suppose, define on who needs to report on it. You're reporting on issues such as, environmental matters. Social impacts is super important. The treatment of our employees and those in our community. Our respect for human rights, anti-corruption and bribery, the diversity of company boards, and this is in terms of age, gender, educational background, professional background. We'll need to report on these things, I suppose, in a number of different ways. So it'll be qualitative information and quantitative. We'll be looking ahead to the future, seeing what our action plan is going forward, and also maybe having a retrospective look at what we've done so far. And it is based on, I suppose, the short, medium, and long-term goals of the business. In terms of who it applies to, so it was introduced this year, so almost 50,000 companies are expected to be impacted by this legislation, and it's about 3/4 of businesses within Europe. So the only people exempt from it are micro industries, so those less than 10 employees. So any company listed on a regulated market within the EU, apart from the micros, large companies, listed SMEs, that is even those with, I suppose, that don't operate within EU, but still have customers within the EU, they would need to comply to these standards as well. In terms of when this is, I suppose, looking to kind of kick in, it's already started. So large companies will have to report on their impacts on 2023 impacts in 2024. SMEs, there is the option to push, I suppose, back on that reporting until 2028. Although, look, there is, I suppose, benefits of getting ahead of the curve now, sorting out and establishing that, I suppose, framework now. So I suppose the important thing, well, not the important thing, there's loads of important things, but something we really wanted to kind of hone in on when we kind of talk about communication is, is the idea of greenwashing. So with, I suppose, any sort of sustainable communication, there is the possibility of greenwashing occurring. So in its broadest terms, it's really any misinformation used to depict an organization, a business, an individual as, as more environmentally friendly or, responsible than it actually is. So it kind of came about in the 1980s, and I think a man, I think his name was Jay Westerfeld, he kind of coined it, and it was basically a term that's being used for when a business is generally dishonest about, how they represent themselves, and when they do so is more sustainable than they are. It kind of came about as, stakeholders, kind of customers, the general public began noting that, business, we expect businesses to be sustainable and to have green initiatives, and customers want to support those. So some companies kind of decided to take advantage of that. So some people, who greenwash invest in, serious marketing strategies to promote maybe certain green aspects of their business while overlooking other parts that maybe are less so sustainable. Others outrightly lie, deliberately, misleading customers and regulators with false information. Greenwashing, I suppose, however, is the thing that you kind of want to emphasize here. It isn't always intentional, and sometimes it's the result, of a business believing, we are responsible, we are communicating as such, but unbeknownst to them, their environmental efforts aren't really up to date. They're not as effective as they should be, or maybe just not as comprehensive as they believe they are. So again, in terms of how this might look in the future, looking ahead and how legislation might change this, we're going to chat, I suppose, very briefly about the Green Claims Directive. I'm conscious to not kind of overburden everyone with what the future might look like and to kind of make this feel like a lecture. But I suppose if we're chatting about communication in the future and how it might look, it is important that we do, I suppose, remain cognizant of it. So in attempt, I suppose, to mitigate the accidental or purposeful, deceitful greenwashing, the European Commission has proposed something called the Green Claims Directive. And it really is that first step to ensuring that claims, are credible, realistic, and externally verified. So I suppose the reason why it's important, we kind of mentioned and touched on at the start that, being green or sustainable is seen, as a significant competitive advantage. Generally we would say, I think it's in the last 5 years, there's been a 70% increase in searches for sustainable goods. However, the European Commission did find in 2020 that 53% of the, I suppose, examined environmental claims were vague, misleading, or unfounded, and 40% were unsubstantiated or unverified. So I suppose to protect the consumer and to kind of protect them from any sort of green marketing technique, strategies or techniques that might take advantage of them, the directive will give or provide assistance or reassurance that when something is sold as green or sustainable, it is in fact sustainable. So much like the CSRD, there is, I suppose, certain companies that will have to adhere to it. So it will affect the vast majority of EU operating companies, from SMEs to larger internationals. Again, it won't affect, for the time being, the micro enterprises, so those less than 10 employees, or those that generate, I suppose, less than 2 million annual turnover. They'll be completely exempt from it. So at the moment, it hasn't been passed. The directive still needs to be approved, I suppose, by the European Parliament and then the Council of the European Union. But it will be introduced in one way or another, and it will be impacted for it. And as I said, this is a good and bad thing. I suppose it's good for the consumer, in that we can now have reassurance that when we buy something, that it is in fact sustainable and green. And it also makes sure that businesses are kind of staying authentic and realistic, and that there is some kind of credible verification process there. So I suppose for communication to be effective, it really has to be engaging. So I'm going to pass you over to Eve next. So she's going to chat to us about, how do we take into account everything we've kind of chatted about? How do we take into account greenwashing and, making sure we're authentic and transparent, but also to get a sense of who the business is, and make sure that narrative of what the business believes in is still there. So Eve, what I might do is I'm going to pop over to yourself now if you want to start sharing your screen.
Great. Here we are. Can you see that?
We can indeed.
Perfect. So hello, I'm just going to be talking about how to share your sustainability story with the media and beyond. So about me, just a quick intro. So I'm an account executive at Beach Up PR, and I work with a wide range of companies from multinationals to tech startups, engaging with creative and insight-driven PRS strategies, thought leadership, and human-centric storytelling. And I really do believe in the power of communication to drive positive change and sustainability. So my interest in sustainability started when I was younger. So I engaged with Eco UNESCO. It's like a young environmentalist youth group here in Dublin. And I contributed to various projects that centered around environmental awareness education. And then during my studies of social sciences and cultural innovation in DCU, I dedicated my thesis to exploring the various dimensions of environmentalism and then its impact on society, looking at fast fashion in particular. Since then, I've worked with health tech, supply chain, e-commerce, and envirotech industry clients. And I work with them to develop captivating narratives and secure prominent media coverage for their companies. Beach Up PR itself, we specialize in domestic and international PR, comm strategy, and corporate storytelling services. And we work with our clients on like a diverse range of creative approaches to key comms challenges. So we work with on their comm strategy, their messaging, their international media campaigns, content creation, speaking ops, award submissions, and background briefings. So that is me. So sustainability media, it's no secret that it's become a popular topic in mainstream media in recent years. From climate change to ESG, CSR, sustainability is still relevant and not to be underestimated, particularly as the market becomes more saturated, as more companies come in. This being said, along with the global media landscape, the Irish landscape is changing, and the Irish landscape is following suit. So it's really important to tell your sustainability story in the most effective way, to get media attention, both positive and to avoid negative media attention. So I've come up with 3 guidelines to follow. So be clear, provide evidence, and be sincere in order to communicate your sustainability goals and achievements to the media. So clarity. So Sophie just spoke about, and thank you, Sophie, and thank you in general for having me. Sophie just spoke about greenwashing, but how can we avoid that? So to ensure that whoever's writing about the company and about your sustainability goals, make sure that they're properly briefed with the right information. This is key. So it could be either the journalist you're speaking to, a copywriter for your website, or your social media manager. You need to make sure that the information they have is accurate and that they have the necessary context, and to avoid buzzwords. So buzzwords, the name of this webinar series, you need to avoid them. They could be tempting because of SEO and just generally trying to get clicks, but they're super ambiguous, and there's usually a lack of clarity identifying these terms like eco-conscious, environmentally friendly, green, natural, earth-friendly. And then recently, offsetting is one I've been seeing a lot in the media that journalists are moving away from. What do these mean? They don't have a direct explanation. Like, the idea of natural is so vague. So if you're going to be using them you need to offer your own clear and relevant explanation, as well as evidence of what these terms represent in the context of your company or practices. Evidence is the next one. Greenwashing was definitely possible in the past, as Sophie said, but consumers are becoming more and more informed, and so are journalists. If you want to be an authority in your sector, evidence is key when backing up any environmental claims. It's really a must. As me and my colleagues pitch environmental correspondence, one thing we see coming up time and time again is the need for hard data in order to make your story particularly impactful and of interest to a journalist, but also to make sure it actually gets covered in the first place. And then sincerity. So basically, sustainability is an ongoing journey. So in order to express that, you need to be personal and make sure it's engaging. And Illustrating your sustainability initiatives and distinctive features of your journey are key, as well as the ideals that motivate your dedication to sustainability. So how do you do this? First of all, make sure it's accessible to all. So don't use too much jargon. Like I come from a comms perspective, so from a comms background. So really, there's nothing that loses me quicker when I'm, say, think of your favorite teacher or lecturer, when you were like sitting in a lecture hall and they start using all of this jargon, you get lost and immediately you're not interested anymore. So it's about avoiding that jargon, because ultimately you want to get your message across. So that is key, as well as making it accessible in general and knowing your audience as well. So if I'm talking to a journalist, say Kevin O'Sullivan from the Irish Times, he is their environmentalist correspondent. I'm not going to explain anything to him because I know he knows more than me than I do at sustainability. So it's just about being clear and concise and knowing your audience in general. But sometimes we mess up and it's difficult to demonstrate a long-term commitment to environmental responsibility. So if a comms crisis does occur, like if you're accused of being greenwashing, or if you're accused of something in general regarding environmentalism, first of all, just acknowledge your shortcomings and make sure your company's initiatives and practices and limitations are known. So basically apologize. Don't try to cover it up. It never works. Be honest is key. Transparency is the running theme throughout all of this. When speaking to the media, let your enthusiasm shine through and use the opportunity for what it is. It's a chance to educate your audience about environmentalist concerns at hand and the steps you personally are taking to address them. And then come across as like a thought leader in your space. So a thought leader, a bit of a comms term, come across as an expert in your space, knowing what you're talking about. This is a great opportunity. Seize it as an opportunity to educate your audience. And finally, encourage discourse and participation in order to reestablish the trust and confidence. Trust comes when a company isn't faceless. So providing a common spokesperson who's happy to talk about the crises itself, who is transparent, is key. Because you can't have sincerity without a certain level of transparency and honesty. So just to conclude, as the media landscape continues to evolve, companies that follow these rules can demonstrate true commitment to sustainability while avoiding the trap of greenwashing. Clarity, evidence, and a sincere commitment to sustainability can all help in the establishment of consumer confidence and the development of a truly environmentally responsible reputation. Reputation is very important. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll be open to questions in a little while. But just in general, you can email me at eva@beachupr.com or scan the little QR code if you want to link up. Great.
Super, thanks, Steve. I really appreciate that. So a few things have just jumped out. So I'm wondering, so we kind of chatted about, you know, what the internal structure will look like, how to chat about that internally. And then I suppose in terms of, how can you actually, I suppose, communicate externally? Are we talking only social media in general, or, you know, what about face-to-face contact or meeting people? How does that work for, I suppose, telling people what you're doing essentially?
Yeah, of course. So if you're moving away, thank you for your question, by the way. If you're moving away from traditional press, things like these, like webinars, conferences, are really, really effective to get your story across. As well as social media. Social media is super important, especially for Gen Z. They're on social media all the time, like myself. So that is key, being aware of your audience. Like if you're trying to get into a Gen Z's mind, you really do need to be on their phone. As well as some in-person activations. So pop-up shops have proven to be super duper popular, I found, when writing up media strategies. Pop-up shops are engaging, they get to meet who's behind the company, and as well as panel discussions. So attending these and listening to your favorite CEOs chat about sustainability can be really, really inspiring.
Absolutely. I have to think. Oh yeah, so something that kind of crops up a lot is, so there's always the debate between, you know, we need to have quantifiable data, we need to be externally verified, you know, we need to be, I suppose, as clear as we can with the language. How do you make sure that you're kind of addressing all of those things while also, like, you know, maintaining that familiar aspect of a business and making sure that that business narrative is still there? Do you think it's possible, or is it a fine art? Is it practice?
Yeah,
how do you find that? Yeah,
it's a good question. Again, as I said, like when people start hearing numbers and stuff like that, sometimes their brain turns off. It just gets a bit jargony. But it's about whoever you have as an in-between translating that message for you. So if it's the journalist, like usually the journalists know what they're talking about. They always do know what they're talking about, especially if they're environmental correspondents. So they will do that translation for you to the general media. They will pick out what's important, and they're masters at weaving a narrative that's interesting. So it's key. Like they'll do that for you basically. But when it's just yourself and you're sticking things on socials or in your website, it's just about knowing your audience. Like if you were describing it to, even say you were describing it to a 10-year-old, how would you translate that? And then once you've established that, get the key terms and put them into that explanation is usually what we do.
Yeah, very fair. Look, there's I suppose the broad discussion on how sustainability is discussed anyway in the media, I suppose, outside of what an individual business is doing. So I suppose the stuff that we can do and stuff like that, you know.
I mean, there's no need to over intellectualize it.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It needs to be accessible for change to come about.
Super. I have just a question here from Matthias. So it's just for you, Eve. So which challenges, I suppose, are most recurring when it comes to promoting company sustainability stories authentically? What do you think, I suppose, is what comes up most often in terms of challenges?
So there is a bit of sustainability fatigue, the same way we're seeing kind of AI become a constant narrative at the moment. Sustainability fatigue it's real. Everyone says kind of year 2019, 2020 was the year of sustainability. It was just everywhere in the media. And as people are approaching kind of like we're in a cost of living crisis, it does kind of go down the list of top priorities in your mind. But that being said, if a journalist sees hard data, they will take your story because it's really, really important. So it's just about providing that evidence. Basically, it's just about providing it instead of saying sweeping statements.
Yeah, something you said there just at the very end, just in terms of the leadership figure in communication. So generally in sustainability, you would have, you know, what it means. We'd have something called an opinion leader, who's basically a trusted person to chat on it. Would you consider that important for communications, or what do you think? And then I see Liam has a question, so we might pop over to him afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do at BeachUp in my company. PR is all about, because the clients I work with, they are thought leaders, they are opinion leaders in their spaces. So it's about getting them out there in front of media. It's key. Because when a journalist thinks of a certain topic, they'll automatically think of you, and then thus your consumers will as well.
Super stuff. Liam, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Sophie. Yeah, that's very good, guys. I really got a lot from that, actually. Even though I work in the traditional lean space, it's nice to see a green skin on it. So yeah, fun. I particularly like your slide later on there, Sophie. Trust is a powerful commodity, and transparency fosters trust.
Yeah,
that's my takeaway from today. Transparency fosters trust. Yeah, look, as you talk, you mentioned the word change quite a lot in both your presentations there.
Yeah.
And I've come across the change model. It's from the mid-90s, so don't mind too much its age, really. It has been tested many, many times in different scenarios. And I guess probably in sustainability space as well. It's by John P. Cotter. It's an 8-step change model. He talks about creating urgency, getting a powerful coalition together, creating a vision for the change. Yeah, I see you guys doing there. Communicating that vision. Yeah. He then talks about taking away the obstacles. And the short-term wins, so important. Like, you know, it's a long journey. This is going to be done by small wins at small steps. And then building on that change, building on them small initiatives. And then most important in the whole lot then is anchoring that change in the culture of the organization. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think sustainability is very like lean in a certain sense that, you know, it's not something you achieve and then you're done with. It's very much something that you just live with for, you know, the rest of as long as the business lives, essentially. You know, the goalpost keeps changing, and it should. You know, it's a stick to beat each other with, essentially.
Yeah, certainly there's a lot in it. So well done, guys. Yeah, that's me.
No problem at all. Thanks so much for your input, Liam. I really appreciate that. What I might do is I'm just going to share my screen very briefly. So we put in the link just to the LinkedIn group. I just want to chat to you super quickly about, I suppose, the next session going ahead. So Julie is going to take the next session for Buzzwords. 2 seconds now. And that is on sustainable success and well-being, and how it's kind of key to performance. So that is on June 28th at 11 a.m. So Julie's left in the link for that anyway into the group chat that you can see there. I've left in the link to the LinkedIn group. You can follow us on Eventbrite as well, or you can join a mailing list. Just tick the box when you're registering. If you have any questions at all, or any thoughts and ideas and just want to get in touch, you can just give me a shout. My email is on the I suppose on the screen there. I do want to thank you for joining. I know this is summertime, and as I seen the good weather come out today, I wasn't sure, but I do appreciate you all coming. Again, any questions or comments